question. How many people in this group have first aid or CPR? Current. One, two, yeah, not very many.
I was number 2.
Okay, so one of the big deals for me as a first aid instructor is that I really encourage you to get a first aid course and to take especially at least a CPR course. They're available through all sorts of different areas. I work for a company called AED Inc., which actually originally was an aquatic group and kind of expanded beyond that. I also work with the Life Saving Society of Canada, so that's who I teach my first aid through. I do defib and CPR courses. So the big thing is that in order to be certified, you need to take a course. Now, in order to have to be an instructor here, you have to have a first aid course. And not only that, you either have to have, what is it, bronze medallion?
Yeah.
Or both?
It used to be and or. I think now first aid is
Yeah.
required.
So first aid is required, but is bronze cross or is it bronze cross or both? Is it both? Bronze cross?
No.
No. So the question came up about the spine board. And the problem with people with spine boards, the problem with people who don't know how to do a rescue with a spine board, they need to be trained. All right, and in order to do a water rescue, you really should be trained at bronze cross or higher, which would be bronze cross or national lifeguard. So either one of those, and it has to be not pool related, it has to be outdoor, it has to be lakes and stuff. And those are two separate courses because again, those safety features of the water temperature and stuff, so when the Coast Guard and that get there, if you've been assisting, at least you're dressed properly. So we want to make sure if we get a spine board here at Toronto Windsurfing Club, what we want to do is make sure that we have some of our staff that are on board have a higher level of swim background in order to use a spine board properly, and especially with a neck cuff. Because we know we had the issue with Jason here, right?
Yep.
And you know, if a spine board and somebody had been trained in that, we might have been able to get them out of the water faster. I used to be a national lifeguard, but I let that go as I got much older, and I should have stuck with my swimming, but I didn't. And so the big thing is that we need to have those things in place before we start looking at buying a spine board. That would be my recommendation anyway at this point in time. It took the club, I don't know how many years to get the defib, which when I was teaching first aid and CPR courses down here, it was one of the things I kept saying, you guys need to get a defibrillator. And then somebody came up with a brilliant idea, oh, if we get a defib, then, you know, we could be sued if we don't use it right. Well, I want to put all your fears away because there's a thing called the Good Samaritan Act. And so anytime you do any type of first aid, CPR, using a defibrillator, you are covered under that law. And the biggest thing under that law is common sense. Okay, now not everybody has that. We know, you know, people that go out there not dressed properly to windsurf, go too far offshore for their abilities. That's not common sense. But hopefully when it comes to a first aid situation that they might have the proper common sense. So one of the things we're going to do today is I'm just going to review what needs to be in your first aid kit, which I have already looked at. Both of them need to be refilled. And the other thing is we're going to talk a little bit about first aid as well. Just not a big, because if you want first aid, we'll have to organize a course here hopefully next spring. And, you know, because we can do, with more than one instructor, we can do up to a group this big, actually. We can do 3 instructors here. And so we could do that as well. But I just want to sort of touch on a couple of things when it comes to first aid. And one is the business of if somebody steps on a nail or a piece of glass here on the beach, what do? Well, you don't yank it out. Okay, if it's a very small piece, no problem, but if it's big and it's well embedded, you want to make sure that you get it removed properly. All right, because when you pull something out of an area that is actually being held, the vessels are being held tight against it, you won't find a lot of blood. When you pull it out, it's going to bleed. All right, so that's one of the big things with taking impalements out. So you probably will end up going to a walk-in clinic, or you maybe even Emerge. I don't recommend Emerge if you don't need it. Make sure when you're, as a windsurfer, check with your family physician if you have one. When was your last tetanus shot done? Okay, because they have to be done every 10 years. I just had mine done. Didn't even know I had to have it, but I happened to be in the doctor's office. I'm physically in the doctor's office. And she says, by the way, you're due for your tetanus shot. So now I'm up to date, so now I know that I'm not. But I don't go around trying to step on nails. So keep your eyes open as well when you're walking on shore for those kinds of things. But, you know, stuff floats in the water, and sometimes it comes up on shore and it's got nails sticking out of it and stuff like that. But more common injuries in windsurfing are getting whacked in the head with the boom or the mast and splitting your head open, which we've also had here. So we want to make sure that we're prepared for those types of injuries. Now, when there's staff here, which Simon says at peak time, there's about 15 of them, they are all trained in first aid, so they should be able to help you for these minor things. When you have things like a head injury, you always have to be aware of other parts of the head injury, like is the person having difficulty knowing what's going on? Are they having blurred vision? Are they starting to feel sick or nauseous? Are they vomiting? These are all things that now require them to get to a hospital. That's a medical emergency. So when we were talking about calling 911, I always sort of look at 911 is it a life and death, or could it be a life and death situation? That's a 911 call, all right? If you don't know, or you think you should call 911, oh, I'm having chest pains. Oh, I don't feel very good. I got a burning sensation coming up from here, and my chest hurts, and I'm having difficulty breathing. When I move, it hurts more. That's a 911 call. But I'm telling you, as the person who's suffering from it, no, don't call. Call. Please call. If they don't want to be transported, they can tell the ambulance guys and sign a waiver that says, I do not want to be transported. Okay, and then if they die, everybody's off the hook. But for you, morally, I'd rather make sure that somebody is only having maybe heartburn than find out that maybe they died later because they were having a heart attack. All right? So those are sort of some of the really light things that you need to kind of look at with first aid. So here on Toronto Windsurfing Club, of course, you know, you can have things like sprained ankles, broken legs, broken arms. Mostly those things will happen if you really get whacked or something, or somebody runs into you, that type of thing. But just be, again, aware of the smooth surfaces in places. And, you know, we are an aging population, so as we age, one of the things you want to do is just make sure that you're very aware of what's going on in your surroundings. So with first aid, I have a few things on the table that I'm going to show you that I think are really important. One is a pair of gloves, the other is a barrier device. So if you happen to be doing mouth-to-mouth on someone, if they're not my spouse, or they're not in my inner circle, my family, I'm probably not going to put my mouth on your mouth. All right? COVID, HIV, you know, all of those other nice, lovely things that we can get from people. Or you can give them. So it's something that we don't want to do. And when it comes to CPR, you can just do compressions only. All right, a lot of people are like, well, how do you do that? Where are they going to get the oxygen from? There is always residual oxygen in the person's lungs that will last for about 10 minutes of pumping. So hopefully the good old-fashioned ambulance and police and fire are going to get there fast. Usually it will be fire first because they're housed. Police, depending on how busy they are, and they have the same standard first aid as we do. And the other one, of course, is your ambulance drivers, and those guys, of course, are the top of the line before they get to the hospital. So it is important that we know when to call those numbers, all right? So if we have all the proper equipment, it works out really well. And here at the club, because we have a defibrillator, does everyone know where your defibrillator is? Okay, it's on the wall beside the change rooms. All right, it's in a box. It's not locked. All right, and it's there. So all you got to do is pick it up, and you also have to pick up the safety kit that goes with it beside it. and you take that out to the scene. And somebody asked me earlier about, well, what if it's raining or they're in the water? Well, you can't do a defib in the water. If it's raining out, it's better to get them to shelter. If you have them here on the ground, if you can splash that water with your hand, then you cannot use the defibrillator in that particular case. We also want the chest dry, so an umbrella over top of somebody in a situation like that, or in the wintertime. You can do it on snow, but not on water. All right. So those are some of the little things that you might need to concern yourselves with when it comes to using the defibrillator, especially around water. All right. The other thing about CPR, if you haven't taken a course, is you have to have the person on a firm surface. All right. So we don't do defib inside a car where it's nice and warm against a soft seat because we can't get the pressure. We prefer to have them on the ground on a firm surface. So when adrenaline is pumping, you're not going to worry about kneeling on this cement. All right, so that's one of the key things that people are like, can I just stand up and do my CPR? No, it's a lot more effective if you're kneeling on beside the person. Okay, so from there, I'm going to grab my stuff, and I'm going to get off the mic, and I'm going to try to speak as loudly as I can. All right, and if not, I'll get Jennifer maybe to grab the mic and just hold it in front of my face. All right, so very important things to have are gloves. Okay, they're varying colors. There's blue ones, there's clear ones, there's pink ones. These ones here are probably old enough like they were when I had to use them at TWC the one time, and we took them out of the first aid kit, and my hand went right through them because they do rot if they're sitting around for too long. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you get the glove on nice and tight and smoothly. Okay, they come in varying sizes, so that was the other problem we had here. We had, I think, all small gloves, so some people with really big hands wouldn't be able to get them on their hand. So you want to get them all the way onto your hand. Okay, so you've got this barrier first, especially if there's blood or body fluids. So I always say if it's wet and it's not yours, don't touch it. Okay, so that's a good thing to go by. This is the little case that goes with your defibrillator. Okay, and inside it is a pocket mask. I love that they call it a pocket mask. If I had that stuck in my pant pocket, it'd be a little bit bulky. So, but they are the best barrier. You have to push this out. Okay, so it comes out. If you keep this type of thing in your car, which I did, I used to keep one all the time in my car. It's great in the summertime, but not in the winter. It's very hard to push this thing back out, all right? So this is shaped like this. This part is where it goes over your nose. This part goes kind of in this part of the chin. This is the adult one, adult child. And this barrier device here has a one-way valve. So if they puke in here, it's not coming at you, okay? But air will move in and out. So that's your barrier device. It's the best one to have. So with my pocket mask, I always have a pair of gloves in it already. So I always know if I have my pocket mask with me, I'm gonna have a pair of gloves. So that's one of the things. You can get these often when you buy your little first aid kit in the stores. Something that looks like this. One-way valve as well. Okay, this part would go in the mouth. This part goes up by the nose. You pinch the nose. With this, I don't have to worry about pinching anything. So again, if I have to pinch the nose even on somebody I know, and they got like, snot coming out of it, that's wet. I'm not sure if I want to touch it. Maybe there's some other stuff in it too. So it can be pretty gross. I always call those the grossness of first aid. And so those are that's your safety equipment. So the other thing is about if you come across an emergency situation, you want to ask yourself, is it safe for me? Is it safe for my patient? Is it safe for everybody else around me? So if I'm going to do a water rescue and I'm not trained to do a water rescue, am I going to jump into the water when somebody's doing this and they're flapping their arms all over the place? Not a chance. I'm going to throw something to them, Okay, so again, those are all those water rescue things that you learn in swim courses. And I'm not recommending that every windsurfer goes out and takes a swimming lesson course, but there are adult lessons out there that teach you some of the basic stuff as well. So sometimes it can be a lot of fun to learn that stuff. And especially after listening to the swimmers that go back and forth over here, is knowing, you know, what you're capable of doing. And it's the same in a situation if there's a fire or anything like that that could harm you, or an area which is enclosed and there's a whole bunch of people down on the ground. I'm not going in there. There's probably some sort of a gas leak. All right, so you need to call 911 and get hazmat here. So with fires, the thing is, the question always is, and most people will do this, they'll assess the situation and see whether or not the person is close enough for them to get them in and get them out without injuring themselves. So if you're going to cause injury to you, then you're no good to your patient. So you need to make sure that you're safe first. So I always tell people, be a little bit selfish. Think about you first. Get your safety stuff on so that you know that you're ready to perform or do whatever it is that you need to do. All right? First aid kits. So I'll talk about those because I'll forget. Okay, there are 2 first aid kits here in these 2. Is there a third one somewhere?
Just the giant big one.
Where is it?
It's in the drawer.
Okay, we didn't find that one in the drawer. So you got a drawer over here that is down low and it has a big red cross on it. That's your first aid drawer. So it's down by the back here. Oh, there it is. Okay, there is another. So these are your portables. I didn't check it out.
That should be the one that's got that stuff.
Okay, and there's a box of gloves in there, but there's none in the first aid kit. So someone should be responsible at the club for checking these at least twice a year. At the beginning of the season, probably at the end of the season. If you have a tendency to use more Band-Aids, like just regular Band-Aids and stuff, there should be extra stocks of those. So you want to make sure that these are checked at least twice a year. All right, so somebody, probably Simon, since he's a real big full-time person, he's been here forever, he would be a good person to designate that. Stuff like this should not be in your first aid kit. WSIB would be up here behind with this because you do employ people. And so if they decided to come in here and check to see what you have in your first aid kit, there's none in here, which is good because that's your main one. But even these things here, we've got gloves here, all varying sizes. And this is the other portable one. And it also has Tylenol in it, which again should be not in there. As a first aid person, we're not supposed to give anyone any type of medication. We can assist with it, but we can't say, oh, here, yeah, there's a bottle of Tylenol for your hangover.
Sick, right?
Oh, you don't drink, that's right. So, yeah, you don't want to be doing that because maybe somebody, especially if it's aspirin, they might have allergies to it and stuff. So they should, I always tell people, I have a medical kit that I keep with me, and I have a first aid kit. So my medical kit has things like Tylenol, it has aspirin, it has an EpiPen, it has whatever else I have to take. But it's my own personal stuff. And so these are sort of key things that aren't in your first aid kit. They are in a medical kit, all right? And medicines really should only be given out by pharmacists and physicians and nurses, especially if they're prescribed. Every first aid kit should have a blunt pair of scissors, which I don't see in this kit.
I think it'll be in one of the right ones.
So it's in one of these ones. So you don't want to be taking this kit out and, well, that's nice of them. They are blunt, but not as blunt as the ones that are in this one. You guys used to have a pocket basket. Okay, so this is the scissors that you guys have. I would highly recommend. Here you go. I would highly recommend that they get a proper pair of blunt ones. They look like medical, surgical type scissors, and they kind of curve up a bit, and they have a big rounded end so you can't poke anyone. But you can use these scissors to cut clothing off, and if you don't have the proper type of scissors, they won't cut anything. The really good ones will cut through a dime, so you can actually cut. Yeah, like this one here, it crosses over, so just like I say, sort of a little thing that should. There we go. So in your defibrillator, you have one. So this is the pair of scissors that I was talking about. They were in.
Oh, there you go.
There's a pair in the defibrillator, but that's the only place they are. You should have one.
I think they got taken out to Pembroke.
Right. And these are useless. These are useless because they cross over.
Yeah.
Doing this thing, which somebody used probably cut rope.
Probably. They've got the better one.
So your first aid kits should be used for that stuff. It's like safety pins at Home Depot, and they have their little patches. They use the safety pins all up out of their first aid kits for pinning their little badges on. So yeah, these are the proper ones. So they will. You start with this flat end, so it's against the skin, and you can cut it. And this will cut through wetsuits real easily. Okay, so that's one of my recommendations for the first aid kits is to get one for each pair, and don't let anyone take them out further.
Yeah. I will tell them it's good. I'll do it.
Yeah.
And whoever else has access to it.
So, like this one has lots of Band-Aids in it, but I would do an inventory of all three of your first aid kits, Simon, and then I'll give you the sheet from WSIB because it's online actually, and it depends on the number of employees that you have in your business as to what you really need in your first aid kit. But for me, you need Band-Aids, scissors, barrier device. You need your you need some tape of some sort. Duct tape works pretty good for a lot of stuff. You know, if you injure yourself, if you've got some gauze pads, you put the gauze pad on, you use duct tape to cover it up. Then it's waterproof and you go back out sailing, right? Told you I'd had some injuries before. And, but yeah, you always want to make sure, and if you have your own personal first aid kit, one of the things that you do want to do is you want to make sure, like, if you're using it up yourself, put more back in there, because then when you have the next injury, you know, you're out windsurfing and the boom comes down, or you fall and you scrape this part, the bony part of your arm, and it rips wide open, and you go to your first aid kit and you go, oh shoot, we used that the last time when I cut this one. You know, so we want to make sure we have that kind of stuff. Tensor bandages are a good thing to have in there, not just for sprains, but again, they're good to wrap and stop the flow of blood when you're bleeding really hard. You can say, oh, now this one's got 2 in it. Safety pins are a good thing. They're great. Triangular bandages, of course, I call them. Oh, there they are. So here's the original ones. These are the ones that we see. So which one do you want me to put it in? This one? Or this one? Maybe I should do this one.
Sure. Use those are like our mobile. That one's just really safe.
Well, then I would make sure that they're mobile. You put those out for people who cut line with and paper, maybe. Yeah, so look at your first aid kits if you're really interested in more information about, I was going to talk about triangulars. So triangular bandages, when they're inside their packages, are also sterile. So they can also be used to stem the flow of blood if that's all you've got. The one thing about first aid, again, using that common sense, it doesn't have to look pretty unless you're taking, anyone in here teach for St. John's? No. If you go to a St. John's, your knots have to be perfect. Everything has to look pretty. The way we teach is it doesn't matter what it looks as long as it's effective. Okay, because if I'm going to the hospital with something tied on me and you tied a granny knot, they're not going to undo it. They're just going to take a pair of scissors and they're going to cut it off. Okay, so don't worry about that. Is it effective and does it work?
and use what you have. So if you have a nice first aid kit that's all laid out like this and has all this nice stuff, that's awesome because you can see it visibly and quickly to grab stuff and be able to, use it right away. But if you have a smaller first aid kit, like something like this or even smaller, I've got one that's like this big too, and it doesn't have much of anything in it, but it's better than nothing at all. Right? So what I would really recommend, if you don't have a first aid kit in your car, that you get one. Again, it's just one of those safety things, not just for you, but if one of your buddies gets hurt out there. We used first aid kits for 3 cars when I ripped open my arm. And, we bandaged it all up, put a waterproof bandage on it, and I went out and sailed for another hour, and then went and got it stitched. So, dumb thing. I'm the worst patient being a first aid person. We should have gone directly and got that fixed up, but we all know that we're not always smart. And I didn't use common sense, of course, because I don't have a lot of that sometimes either. But that's okay. Okay, any questions sort of on the quick blurb on first aid kits and stuff?
Yeah.
Yes.
Under the Good Samaritan Act, we're protected if we at least try.
Yes.
Why would that not apply to spinal cords, at least if you try to get it without the training? I'm not talking removal, but I'm talking maybe floating.
I think the biggest thing is it depends on where they are offshore.
Yeah.
And knowing how to do a proper water rescue. Because you're supposed to work within your training whenever you do anything. So if I haven't been trained at all, obviously I shouldn't be held accountable. I mean, my concern would be in the sense if they have done something up in this neck area, which Jason had, and he was moved incorrectly, he could have been paralyzed from here down. So for me, even as a water rescue person, even with my knowledge of water, I would be a little bit hesitant if you're telling me my neck really hurts. If I wasn't trained on putting the proper neck brace on first, so I wouldn't want to put a person on a spine board until I have a neck brace on. And that's really quite a special. I can't remember the girl's name. Is here? Anybody remember what her name was? Like she was saying, they are trained in marine first aid, which is what we call advanced first aid. So it's one step above the standard first aid that you guys would get if I did a training course. And usually it's people who are dealing with really higher level medical problems that we do that with.
I guess the worry, among other things, is hypothermia.
Yes.
Leaving somebody in the water too long.
Well, that's the thing, and I mean, if they go unconscious, non-breathing, then we're going to move them anyway. That's the big difference. So if they do go unconscious, non-breathing, then you move them no matter what they're in or what state they were in. And if you even already know that they have a neck injury, you're just going to try to protect their head, neck, and shoulder area as still as possible. But yeah, I mean, sort of a toss-up, but that's a whole reasoning behind really recommending that at least maybe 2 of the full-time people maybe have their MLS or their, like, take those swim courses over the winter. And, even if TWC pays for it, they need the time, obviously, to be able to do it, but I think it's important that someone is trained or 2 people at least get these 2 different levels at the time of the day when people are here. Yeah. It doesn't, or even anyone in the group, for that matter. Like it's. Oh yeah, yeah. But I mean, anyone who wants to go out and start taking swimming lessons and stuff and work your way up through that ladder. I mean, as an adult, we usually can do it a little bit faster than kids, that's for sure. It's your swimming capabilities and being able to swim in open water against waves or whatever you might need to do. I mean, here it would be mostly boat rescue in most instances, so it would be not only knowing how to use a spine board to get under the person and get them on board, but because the spine board it's kind of like when they do the stuff on the ski hills, got two pads that you get the person on, but if you've got the neck brace on, then the two pads come off, you get them onto the board, and then you stick these things to the Velcro so that their head won't move, so when you're lifting them, you're not turning it off. So that would still be my recommendation. Your defib is a little bit different type of machine than the one I have. This one here, which is the light pack, is similar to the ones that they have like at Toronto Airport, only theirs are more square. But they all work on the same kind of premise. They have an on-off button. So this one has a green button that you have to push. So if you do bring this machine out, you want to make sure that you press it and turn it on. We've had instances where people were not trained in how to use a defib and they forgot to turn it on. You know, the machine's not working. Well, no, it doesn't work if you just open this lid on this and you have to turn this button on. This one here, when you open it up,
Call for help
it starts
now.
talking to you right now.
Remove
All right, and it talks you through the prompts, so we're going to go through that. I'm not going to turn your live one on, but it's very similar. It's got an on-off button. You're going to be pulling this to get at the pads. And best place to put the defibrillator. So the first thing you would do, whoever comes and gets the defibrillator, would bring this with them. I would hook this to here, so that it's always with the machine. And it's got gloves in it. It's got a shaver in it. Why do we need a shaver? Well, if they're hairy, we need to shave their chest, just where the pads are going to go. I asked Simon if he wanted to be a demo, but he said no thanks.
Come on, Simon.
And you can't cut them because the way this thing works, it's got a little edge here, so you'll never slice them. And if you're working on somebody that you need to put a defibrillator on, they're dead anyway, so they're not going to hear or feel anything if you do hurt them. This is you bury your mask. I would actually stick a pair of gloves in here.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would stick like maybe a couple of different sizes of medium or large, depending on what sizes you have. I would want, the gloves in there too, so that if you send somebody for the defibrillator and they don't bring the first aid kit, then you've got gloves with the ladies. So a bit of a safety issue. How many people have ever taken a CPR course? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people, 7 people. When was the last time you took one? Decades. Yeah, if it's been a while, the stuff has changed. I noticed your Red Cross first aid book there is updated. There are new protocols that were in all first aid and books, manuals and stuff was updated in 2020. So we have very specific things that we have to, guidelines that we have to follow when it comes to So, with defibrillation, when would we want to put this machine on somebody? Anybody know?
No breathing, no pulse.
Right. How do we know as a lay person that this person doesn't have a pulse? What does he look like?
Blue?
Yeah, he's a little blue.
Stop windsurfing.
Stop windsurfing. My guy has a windsurfing shirt on. Yeah, so the color is a good giveaway. We used to check pulse. That's gone. And the reason why we took that away, because a lot of times we can't find it. So that's the biggest thing. You're all freaking out anyway because this person's looking like this. So we try to find a pulse, and we're doing this kind of thing with a hand and a thumb, and so now we're getting our own pulse. Oh, he's alive! Well, he's not. He's dead. So we took the pulse out for any lay persons, which is us, healthcare professionals still have to do it. All right. So how else can I tell? I can tell by if I touch the person, what do they feel like? Cold. Okay, cold to the touch. All right. They're going to be blue, gray. Doesn't matter what color your skin is. We live in a multicultural society. Their skin is going to kind of go a grayish color. People are really dark skinned. Sometimes you have to just push down on the inside of the lip to see what's going on in there. Another reason for having gloves. I don't want to stick my hands on somebody's mouth that I don't know. So that's one of the things. The other thing is we can look across the chest and see whether there's any movement. If I didn't have this big jacket on, I could lay on the ground, like in the summertime. If I was lying on the ground, you'd be able to see chest expansion, even if it's shallow. Okay? So if you don't think that they're breathing, they look like they're dead, they probably are. All right? And those are the instances that you need to do a couple of things. First of all, we have the parties down here. So you come down and you find some guy passed out on the ground, and he's looking not too good because he OD'd or almost OD'd on something. So you still want to put your gloves on, or you just want to call 911 because you can visibly see that he's not in a good way. All right. If I feel comfortable and I have my gloves on, I might come up and go, hey, 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 wake up, wake up. And if I don't get any response, okay, we know it's a true medical emergency. But when do we phone 911? We phone 911 after we recognize that the person isn't breathing and looks like they don't have a pulse because they're blue, all right? And you check that responsiveness, and you call 911, all right? Because the sooner you can get 911 here, the better. If it's a cardiac issue, in other words, the heart is stopped, or it's in that fibrillated, what they call a fibrillated situation where the heart's just doing this literally inside this is your heart, it's doing this inside your chest. So it's not pumping oxygenated blood. So you need to get help here as quickly as possible. This gives you a lot better chance of survival if you have a defibrillator on site. And that's why I'm so glad that TWC finally invested in one of these and in the training so that people would understand how to use it. So part of my purpose here today is to make sure that people would understand how easy it is to use these machines. And they all work on the same premise. So this one here, which is here here, works exactly the same as my trainer does. All right. So when you come across a person like this, and I'm working at TWC, and I see somebody like this, and I'm going to say, "Hey, you go get the defibrillator and the first aid kit." So he should know where that first aid kit is if he's a member here. All right. So that's one of the key things: is know where your first aid kits are and know where your defibrillator is, so that you can actually get it. And if there's somebody else here, can you go call 911? So now you've got 911 called. You've got the defib coming, you've got the first aid coming, and then I can continue to work with the patient. All right, and some of those things would be is after I've done this and checked this, I'm going to start compressions. So how do I know how to do compressions? Well, there's two ways. You can lift up the shirt because you're going to have to remove this anyway. And you look into the center of the chest, right along that sternum. You take your left hand, everybody do this. Take your left hand, place it in the center of your chest. Okay, ladies, we got boobs in the way, but just get the hand right in there. So the heel of the hand is right on the sternum. And then you would place the second hand on top, lock your fingers so you're using the heel of the hand, not the whole hand. Because people have a tendency to do this and just sort of slap their hand on here. It's heel of the hand in the center of the chest. And then you're going to push down. Okay, and it's firm. Okay, you need to get down 2 inches on an adult chest and almost 2 inches on a child. So it's quite deep, and then the compression rate's going to be between 100 beats and 120 beats per minute. So for those of you, most of you here would know this song. Another one bites the dust. Oh, wait a minute, that's not the one I want you to remember. want you to remember staying alive. Staying alive, staying alive. So if you think of those songs, my daughter always thinks of another one, Bites the Dust, but so if you think of those two particular songs run between 100 and 120 beats per minute. Okay, so if you can think of that noise or in your head, you can do it. I've had taught classes where the whole class is singing it. Not another one Bites the Dust, but the, so you're doing your beats. Okay, and you're waiting for the defibrillator. You're like, where the heck's the defibrillator? Okay, so somebody brings your defibrillator. If they're trained or are not trained in first aid, it doesn't really matter because they can start the whole defib portion of it. It's better if they do know it. If they do know first aid or CPR, identify yourself to come and help because it's always nice to have a second person here helping you out. If you've got more than one barrier device and you have lots of gloves, then people can help and actually do breathing and switch off and on. Because once you hook this up, it goes for 2 minutes before it'll ask you to stand back again to analyze. And during that time, where'd Simon go? Yo, get your body over here. I need your body.
You're gonna get zapped.
Okay, so you're no first aid, so it would be like you were going to come in and help. So we were just talking about that.